Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Tonight we're doing a What the Fairy Tale? Hit it. Alright, so tonight's fairy tale, we're going to be talking about Cinderella. Man, Cinderella, whew. This one is... Alright, I mentioned in my last one that obviously fairy tales have existed the whole wide world over, that the Grimm brothers are not like the original writers of the fairy tales. I know that, but I mean, I am going to be referencing Grimm for the most part for now because they are the ones that I'm the most familiar with. But I'm just going to put a plug in there so everybody understands and nobody gets all hot and bothered. I know that Cinderella was written or told way before the Grimm brothers. Like, there's even some people who say there's a Greek Egyptian version of it. I'm not so sure about that. I think the only true Cinderella aspect part of that story is a shoe. There's a slave whose shoe gets taken by an eagle and the king finds it, and then he wants to find out who owns the shoe, and he marries the girl. Which is like, the shoe is a very big part of Cinderella, so I can also see why people say that is the original. But the one that was written in China, like, what was it, 600 or 700 AD? That one has the shoes, and it has the evil stepmother and a stepsister, and it has like the not a fairy godmother, but magical bones of a fish that her mother sent her to be her friend. Anyways, there's an aspect-ish of a fairy godmother, sort of. There's a wish-granting plot point in that version of Cinderella. So that one, I'm going to vote, is the most ancient one we know of and original. But yeah, the Cinderella stories were told again and again and again over many different cultures. There's like an Italian one and a French one, and then the Grimm's brother is the German one. The French one is the one that the Disney version is based off of. It has the glass slipper and the pumpkins and the mice. That is the French version one, I believe. So yeah, tonight though, we're going to be focusing on the Grimm brothers, and because I have the full version of it here with me, and yeah, it's a lot of fun though. So whether it is 1,000 years old or, you know, only a couple hundred years old, it's still fascinating to see what people told their children for bedtime stories 200 years ago. Okay, so the most interesting aspect of the Cinderella story I find in the Grimm's brother is that I have yet to read a Cinderella retelling where the father is alive through the whole story. Into the Woods, the father's alive, but you know, that was a play. And that's the only one I can think of where the dad is alive, because in the Grimm brothers version, he's alive and well, and he's alive through the whole thing. And not only is he alive, he's kind of a jerk to his daughter. So that would be an interesting thing to bring into a retelling, I think. That's why I like reading the originals. It gives you an idea of like, oh, that would be kind of different. What would that do to Cinderella? I mean, that would add to the complexity of the abuse she's going through, to have her father be a culprit in the abuse. Anyways, moving on. Part of the reason why Cinderella is so good is when her mother was on her deathbed, she called Cinderella to her and said, "Dear child, be good and pious, and God will always take care of you. And I will look down upon you from heaven and will be with you." So those were the last words from her mother. So obviously Cinderella feels this huge weight, responsibility to be good and to be pious and to make her mother proud of her in this version of the story. So the father, before even a year has passed away, he gets remarried. And of course, the children are all the two stepsisters are very jealous. And the stepsisters in the German version, the Grimm version, they're beautiful. They're not ugly. They're beautiful. They just have ugly hearts, according to the brothers Grimm. Okay. So this is a really weird part of the story. The father is going to a fair and he asks his stepdaughters and his daughter what they would like him to bring back for them. And I'm with the stepsisters on this one. Maybe I have to edit that. I'm with the stepsisters on this one. If my rich dad is going to a fair and says, I'll bring you back any gift you want, yeah, I'll ask for pearls and diamonds or whatever I think I can get away with. Absolutely. But Cinderella, I don't know if it's because this is supposed to show how good she is, that she's not selfish, but I think it's just it's a little strange part of the story. She asks him to bring back the first branch, the first twig that strikes against your hat. I don't know, what is this kind of plot convenience point? Who asks for that? That makes absolutely no sense. It's only put in there so that she can plant it and it can become a tree over her mother's grave, a magical tree that will later grant her wishes in the story. I mean, as far as plot points go in a story, that one I think can be taken out. And we can just have a tree growing there. Or she can just go get a twig herself and plant it to be a tree for her mother over her mother's grave. I don't know. It's just, it's a weird aspect of the story. Just, letting everyone else know that too. All right. So then we get to the point where there is going to be a festival. This is one of the parts of the Grimm's brother version that I love, is it's not just a ball for one night, it's a festival. It's 3 separate nights where they're going to have dancing and revelry. And I think it would be fascinating to do a retelling where it's kind of, almost like The Bachelor, or I guess it would be kind of like The Selection, but a Cinderella story, where the king has maidens from all over the kingdom come to meet his son and to have him court them. And it's, instead of just being a one-night thing, like a month or a couple months where he is actually getting to know each one and developing a relationship with them. That I think would be more interesting than just the one-night ball, and allow for a real romance to develop between the prince and Cinderella. But anyways, in this book, it is 3 nights, which is better than only 1. So yeah. Of course, Cinderella wants to go. Her stepmother says no. She throws some lentils into the ashes and Cinderella has to pick them out. But Cinderella in this book has some kind of magical powers, because she calls the doves, the birds, to come pick the lentils out for her. It gets done in 1 hour's time. And then the stepmother, fairy tale characters are just not the brightest tools in the box, because then the stepmother is like, oh, you did that? You got that done? Well, here's 2 bowls of lentils. Ha! Gotcha now. You'll never be able to pick those out of the ashes. And it's just weird, because it's if this stepmother can make such ridiculous limits on her stepdaughter, or rules, you have to do this ridiculous task to be able to go to the ball, then she obviously can just say, no, you can't go, which is what she eventually does. So I don't know why she doesn't just say, no, you can't go in the first place. I think this just serves to demonstrate that Cinderella can control the birds and can call them to her aid, which is a cool power and kind of terrifying, because birds are terrifying. I have personal experience to be able to say that. That'll be for a different time. Anyways, so Cinderella has some magical powers. That tree that she planted over her mother's grave, she cried over it and it grew into a fine tree. That was not a lot of time for that twig to turn into a tree. So she's got these magical tears. She can talk to birds. And she knows how to get to this tree to grant her magical wishes. Because what happens after the stepmother says, here's 2 bowls, you'll never get that done. And of course she does, because if you can do 1 bowl, you can do 2 bowls. The stepmother says, no, you're not coming. And Cinderella is so brokenhearted, she runs out to her tree and she, asks the tree to rain down silver and gold on her. And so a bird comes and gives her a splendid dress and shoes, and she's able to go to the ball. She dances with the prince. Everybody's like, who's that lovely girl? And then she runs away. The prince follows her. He loses sight of her when she jumps into a pigeon house. The prince tells the dad, hey, who is somebody in your family jump into that pigeon house? And the dad's like, oh, could it possibly been Cinderella? And then he cuts down the pigeon house because I don't know why he couldn't just climb up it and look inside, but he decides it's better to destroy his property instead. And she's not there because she has managed to, she has managed to slip away into the house without anybody seeing her. So she's also has this magical power to become invisible. Like, this Cinderella girl she's magical. I don't know if any of the retellings have Cinderella having magical powers, but they should, because she is clearly magical if you're going off of the Grimm brothers version. This girl has powers, okay? Because the next night when she escapes from the prince, she climbs up a pear tree, which her father chops down because he's an idiot. And she manages to climb down. It says she climbs down the other side of a tree. Well, I don't know how big this pear tree is, but you can still see the person climbing down it if you're standing right there. So apparently the prince is also blind because he doesn't see. Oh yeah, no, he's not blind. Cinderella is magical. That's right. That's what we decided. She has magical powers and is able to keep herself invisible and sneak back into the house so no one is the wiser. And then on the third night, the birds bring her the most beautiful dress of all and a golden slipper. And she dances the night away. The prince spreads pitch or tar on her way home to make her get stuck, but she manages to get free. She leaves the shoe behind. The prince takes it and is like, whoever can fit into this shoe. Okay, this is another part of the Cinderella story I don't get, and this is like an aspect of the Cinderella story that exists in all cultures. Like, why is Cinderella's foot the only foot that can fit into this shoe? I mean, does she literally have baby feet for feet? Is she like deformed that way? I mean, I don't mean that in like trying to bash on people with baby feet if there's anyone that has baby feet, but it's just weird. Like, women come in all shapes and sizes. Some of them have small feet, some of them have big feet. There's no way Cinderella is the only maiden in the kingdom whose foot can fit inside the slipper. But I mean, it is a fairy tale. I guess if we're gonna go with impossibilities, there's also no way a magical tree can grant us wishes. So I should just get over it. Okay. Anyways, so the prince goes to look for the fair maiden. He comes to this family, and the stepsisters, one chops off her toes, the other chops off her heel. A dove tattles on them, like literally tattletales on them, because they're with the prince. He's going off thinking he has the right bride. So, not the sharpest tool in the box, he is. And the bird has to come down and tell him, like, hey, dude, check out her shoe. There's a lot of blood coming out of that thing. I don't think you want to marry this chick. And it happens twice. So after the first person, he doesn't even bother to check the second sister's shoe to see if it is also filled with blood. He's just like, trust them. He's like, oh, your shoe fit. Okay, let's go. And then the bird has to, clue him in. And then he comes back. And he says, is there anybody else? And this is where the father, you're like, man, this father is so horrible. He's like, no, there aren't any other maidens in the house. Just a little stunted kitchen wench that my wife left behind. And it's like, dude, not cool. And by the way, at the end of the book, Cinderella goes off and she's happily married. The stepsisters, their eyes get plucked out by the birds because they were so mean and evil to Cinderella. But nothing happens to the stepmother and to the father. And that's messed up because I feel like those two are the ones who are the biggest culprits because they were the adults. And so they definitely should have had some sort of comeuppance, but they don't. It all falls to the stepsisters and they're the ones that get punished. Whatever. Life's not fair. So, okay, hope you enjoyed that. My version of the Grimm's fairy tale Cinderella. I reread two different retellings of this. One is Geekerella and one is Stepsister. They are completely different from each other. So Geekerella, a novel by Ashley Poston. This book, to be honest, I didn't have high expectations because I don't know. I was just looking for a retelling that was set in modern times because all the other retellings were, more fantasy type. So I just wanted something a little different. And yeah, to be honest, I wasn't really expecting too much from it. So I was pleasantly surprised. Not like it's a 5-star read for me or anything, but I enjoyed myself. I read it quickly and fast, and I liked pretty much all the characters. Like the Cinderella character, I liked her. She was probably the one that I connected to the least. I don't know. And I get like, I don't know. It's a hard character to write because she's someone who has been abused her whole life, and emotionally and probably physically even. And so I get that she just doesn't know how to stand up for herself. She's very meek and mild or whatnot. But it's like in her head, she's always talking back to her stepsisters and her stepmother, but outwardly she's just like being really compliant. And so even though I understand from a realistic perspective that someone who's going through this type of abuse isn't going to stand up to their abuser necessarily, it's a hard character to connect to in some ways. And I feel bad for that. Like I feel like I should be able to connect to her. I shouldn't be so kind of like, girl, like, come on, you need to say something, or you need to do something, make your situation better. But anyways, it's just a very small qualm. It's not even like I disliked her. There was something there that was causing me to have some kind of a disconnect. But ultimately, I do like the person, and I feel like she has a decent character arc. The romance, I think, is done really well. Is kind of like a You've Got Mail type of a situation where they know each other somewhat on one aspect where they think they're enemies. But then on another level, they are texting each other back and forth, even though they don't know who each other are through a thing that happens. They end up being, pen pals through the phone. And so it's really cute because you can see this friendship developing over the phone and then romance, but they don't know that. And then when they first meet, they think that they are the person that each other hates. So I liked that. That was really cute and done really well. I love the friendship that she has with her coworker. I think it's so great. This is one of my favorite characters in the book, is her friend with the green hair. That was really good, really well done. And I liked, for the most part, I like the way like that the ball sequence was done, and her dance with the prince. Like all of that worked really well for me. I liked the prince's character. He was very likable. I enjoyed him. The things that didn't quite work as well, I feel like the villains were very one-dimensional and there's just no depth to them. It's her stepmother is mean. She's just mean, right? And I know it's a short book. You can't really, and you don't want to spend too much time on the villain, so to speak, but it just feels so cliche kind of. And the stepmother is mean. The stepsister is mean. There's one stepsister who's kind of nice, which is like a very well-known, kind of already done twist to the Cinderella story. I don't know. I want there to be something more to my villains. Like, what is that driving force that's making them so mean? Because maybe I'm just really sheltered. I don't know very many people who are just mean, like for no reason at all. They're just born mean. I don't know. Maybe they are. Anyways, I like to have my villains to have a little bit more complexity to them and motivation. That's all I'm going to say. And then I feel like it did kind of start to drag a little bit. Retellings often start to drag. I think it's really hard to keep a retelling in motion. Yeah, that one, it dragged towards the end. And then the ending was okay. It wasn't like, ooh, that was so good. It was okay. So yeah, and that's Geekerella. Okay. The other retelling that I did was Stepsister. I'm going to actually do a full review on this one because where I do spoilers and everything, because I really liked it. This is my favorite YA novel that I've read this month. Actually, it's my favorite YA novel that I've read in a really long time. And so I'm going to dedicate a more in-depth review to this one. But just for keeping it brief, Just to keep it brief, I will say something that was so smart about this one is starting off with the sister cutting off her own toes, because through flashbacks and things like that, you do get somewhat of a retelling of the Cinderella story, but then you also get to go so much more beyond it. And so, of course, there's going to be this redemption arc because it's about the stepsister, which I love me a good redemption arc. It is my favorite in character development. Yeah, so I loved the characters in this book, like almost all the characters I love, even the characters, that are mean or that you're supposed to hate, whatever, like I love them. They're great characters. And this book has so many beautiful quotes in it, so many things that I think would be so good for a young girl to read and to really take in. It's definitely one I'm going to keep. I am not going to ever unhaul this book. It is one that I would want my own daughter to read definitely one day. And with that character development, I love how so many of the female characters interact with one another. I don't want to go into too much depth, but I will say I like that in order to make this character arc or development work for the stepsister, the one I'm talking about is Isabel, they didn't need to make Cinderella, they didn't have to be negative towards Cinderella. Like, they don't have to be like validating or excusing her behavior towards Cinderella by being like, oh, well, Cinderella was this or she did that. Like, there's none of that. You can make both characters likable and very, very different from each other, completely different personalities, but they're both still valid personalities and they're both likable people and they're both people who deserve good things, right? Like, just because this person has this strength and this one is this strength doesn't mean that makes one of them better than the other. They are both great, wonderful people characters. So I really like the way that that was handled. The other things that I liked, I really enjoyed the twists that were involved in the book, and I loved the romance. I loved the romance in this book. There was just the right amount of conflict, just the right amount of tension, and none of it felt like ridiculous. It all felt natural and like, I understand why there was this misunderstanding, or I understand the decisions that the characters are making. This makes sense. So it was so good and satisfying to have like that kind of a romance in the book. As far as negatives, they're really just like kind of tiny things, like nitpicky things. Because overall, I do really like it. This might be slightly spoilery what I'm going to say. So if you don't want to hear it, just be like, okay, peace. The ending parts of the ending, I feel like were just a little too tidy. There are two characters, Fate and Chance, which you're introduced to at the very beginning. Fate, like the fates from the gods. And, they're the ones that they create people's fates, right? So they're the ones that have fated Isabel to have this kind of horrible life. And then Chance comes in, he steals her map, and he tries to rewrite her destiny. He's Chance. He's the one that he's giving you a chance at something else if you want to take it. And so there's sort of this battle between Chance and Fate, which for me creates something of a convoluted plot in some places. And that part starts to feel like it's going to start dragging, and I'm feeling a little bit of exhaustion with their battle, but it does resolve itself. So that's one of the flaws. And then the other flaw I would say is I would like to see, well, you know what, we'll leave it at that, because we'll get more into it in my full review. Overall, really, 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 really liked this book. Really done retelling, and I am going to take some tips from this to figure out how to do my own kind of retelling. All right, that's it for now, and I will see you later. Comment down below on your favorite version of Cinderella, your favorite Cinderella retelling, what you like about Cinderella, what you don't like, whatever the case may be. And I'll see you later. Bye.